Behold, the Holley carburetor trail of failure. And as I sit behind this assortment of troublesome, frustrating, sometimes very difficult to diagnose, and mostly universal Holley carburetor parts, I'm like, the only thing I can think of is, how have I not done this video before? 7 years, over 100 carburetor videos, and no, I've never covered the whole chain of events that can cause accelerator pump failure. And accelerator pump failure is probably the most common of all Holley carburetor issues. Now, I came across this, I guess the reason I haven't done this video is because I haven't come across a problem that had me perplexed for more than a few minutes. You do this stuff for 50 years and it just becomes second nature. But if you remember, a few days ago, we fired up our scrapyard save, whatever the hell we call it, 383 in the 67 Belvedere. I pointed out that I had no primary accelerator pump on that carburetor. We fired the motor up anyway, and it ran fine. And then afterwards, edited the video, come back here to the shop, and I said, well, let's just fix this accelerator pump. And it wasn't any of the usual suspects. I'm going to run through all of the usual suspects. It was actually an unusual problem, a relatively unusual problem that I've only come across a time or two before. And that made me say, hey, if I'm being stumped by this, imagine somebody who's just learning carburetors or kind of new to this whole thing. Imagine the level of frustration that this is going to cause. So what I'm going to do here is go through every link of the chain in a common Holley accelerator pump system and point out some variations, but each of the potential problem areas, what goes wrong with them, and the fix. So this is going to apply to the primary side of your vacuum secondary carburetors, and it's going to apply to both the primary and the secondary side of your double pumpers. All right. So let's start at the very beginning. You step on the gas, you open the throttle. What's the very first thing that happens? Well, when you open the throttle, you've got this little nylon cam, right? And there are different cams, different colors, they have different rates, and they're actually tunable. You can see that weird little wood screw, this is from the factory, this weird little wood screw that they put in this nylon cam to hold it in place. And by switching it between the number one and number two position, you can change the profile slightly. But I have seen these things on very old carburetors, usually normal street driving type of carburetors, where the cam part of it is actually worn out. So that when you open the throttle, there's no movement at the lever at first. And this cam, for you guys who aren't familiar, is located right there, right where I'm pointing, okay? So, not common, but I have bought carburetors, a lot of swap meet and yard sale carburetors that were actually missing this. So it's something to be aware of. Now, this cam turns and it moves this lever right here. So that lever is located. I know, listen, we have a lot of beginners, a lot of guys who are just starting with this stuff, so they're not familiar. That's why I'm going to go through these baby steps. That's located right here, okay? So the cam lifts up here and pushes down on the accelerator pump. I have come across many of these, and I'm actually guilty of it myself at times, but I've come across many of these that were bent in such a way as to either try to fix an accelerator pump problem or tune. So these things will get bent, and when they get bent, the lever action changes a little bit and the angle of attack will change. So when I say angle of attack, when you open the throttle and this is pushing down, it's doing it with this screw and spring assembly. Now that screw and spring assembly, where is it? I can't, there we go. This screw and spring assembly right here has to be adjusted so that as soon as you touch the throttle, even the slightest bit, there's movement. It's pushing down on that lever. And the proper adjustment is to have right here Okay, they say to slip a piece of paper in between and that's a proper adjustment. No, proper adjustment is to have it contacting. You don't want to have it depressed, but just contacting. So that's the proper adjustment for that. If this lever gets bent, it can change the way the bolt rides again. Boy, this is a Mickey Mouse setup, isn't it? But they've sold millions of these things over 60, 70 years. If this is bent, it can change the angle of attack so it doesn't hit this arm squarely. And you see that arm has that little nub on it, okay, right there. Well, the nut and bolt assembly has to hit that squarely. So that's something to be aware of. All right, now, this part never has a problem. Well, I'm sure somewhere somebody has had a problem with this, but this part in general never has a problem. This part nearly always has a problem. This is the accelerator pump diaphragm itself. Now, listen, if you buy one of these things that's been sitting on a shelf for, let's say, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, listen to me. As soon as you go like this to the carburetor, you killed this, because this rubber, and it's like a hybrid rubber. It's like a rubber gasket, a rubber cardboard kind of mix, because it is. Well, the diaphragm part of it itself is rubber, but it's attached to this gasket material that seals this to the carb body. Well, this will rip right here, right in this area, anywhere around it, and so now it'll leak. Every time you touch the gas, it'll drip out of that. They'll still function as an accelerator pump, but these things will leak like crazy. I actually have one leaking on the back of that same carburetor I had the accelerator pump issue with. All right, but as soon as you touch one of these things that's been sitting for any amount of time and that has a chance to dry out, it'll crack that rubber right there, and she leaks. This spring right here is intended to return the diaphragm to its fully outstretched position, and I have seen these things corroded so badly that they have no spring tension left or they break. And when that happens, you won't get any accelerator pump filling, because so the arm pushes, this lever arm pushes up on the accelerator pump, and then the spring returns it back down again. So if there's a problem with the spring, you won't get any pump. Not common, but I have seen it. All right, now here's another one. Now we're going to continue up the chain here. Now you have several different float bowl configurations. What you need to know about the accelerator pump is, at some point in this system, it has to allow gas to come down into the pump, but not get squirted back into the carburetor or into the float bowl, instead forced through the passages to actually get to the squirters and the accelerator pump itself. So basically, when the diaphragm is forced up, so the diaphragm comes down under that spring pressure and it draws gasoline into the reservoir. But then when you open the throttle, you can't have the gasoline return back to the float bowl. It has to go to the shooters. So a couple of different configurations. The ones that use check balls are usually pretty reliable. I can't recall having many problems with those. The check balls they don't corrode in place. They'll function. But there's this style that uses this little umbrella seal. So I don't have a full seal. I just looked everywhere to see if I had one of these seals, but I don't. But this little nub is broken off. So if you look inside right here, you'll see a witness mark where that umbrella sealed off all of those holes. So accelerator pump pulls fuel in, and then the little umbrella that's supposed to be attached to that nub blocks off those holes, so that another fuel gets squirted into the squirters, into the rest of the system. So this is a common situation. Older carburetor, 20, 30, 40 years old. These little umbrellas get brittle like rocks, and that's it. They're done. So that won't seal, and no matter what you do to the rest of the system, you're not going to get any pressure into the, towards the squirters. All of the pressure is going to be diverted back into the float bowl. Did I explain that correctly? I don't know. I hope I did. All right. So now, we have another situation that occasionally happens with these float bowls. So almost all of them are cut like this. And this right here is the feed hole for the rest of the accelerator pump system. There are some of these float bowls that have a boss that extends to directly, this one doesn't have it, okay? But they have a boss that extends directly to this surface right here. And if you use one of these non-stick gaskets, if that boss hasn't been machined all the way down, these non-stick gaskets have just enough overlap to them that it won't seal that hole, and you'll get a pressure leak between the gap that leaves and back into the bowl. So you'll may get an accelerator pump shot, but it'll be very weak, and no matter what you do, you can't get a solid shot out of it. Check your float bowl and see if it has that boss right there. And if it does, just take a Dremel and trim it down so it's not overlapping, and then it won't kind of pull that gasket to where it's, you get the general idea? Okay, so, all right, we're gonna leave the float bowl now, and we're gonna go to the metering block. Okay, so this is a typical Holley metering block, and let's see. Here is your feed hole, and this aligns with that feed hole. And then you see this passage right up here. This passage comes straight up. I've seen this clogged. I've seen this passage get clogged, and it's not easy to clean out. You have to fish wire through. Sometimes it's better off if it's a common metering block. Sometimes it's better off just throw the damn thing away than try to free this up. But the accelerator pump, the gasoline from the accelerator pump gets pushed up this passage and then exits right here. And this is above the power valve. Now, accelerator pump, if you've got an accelerator pump problem and everything to this point has been good, then you need to blow compressed air through that hole and make sure, or you can just blow with your lips against it, just blow air through and make sure it's clear. If it's not clear, that's clogged, and that's a problem. But now you have two different varieties of this. This is by far the most common one. I'm going to say 90% of the carburetors you're going to come across are going to be just like that. Right? Then you've got this style. Whoops, and there goes the check ball. Because I cannot do one of these videos without dropping stuff on the floor. And if you think I'm gonna go find that little tiny check ball in this floor, it ain't gonna happen. So you're gonna have to use your imagination from this point forward about the check ball. All right, you've got this style right here. So this style, and Ford factory carburetors, ones that were intended for specifically for Fords, like 302s, 351s, that sort of thing, have this setup. I don't know which aftermarket ones or other variations have it, maybe Marine, I don't know, but Fords for sure definitely have this. So instead of having this nice simple hole right here that seals against that hole at the top right above, so here's where your power valve goes, and here's this one little hole, so that aligns right there. You see that relationship, okay? Well, this one, this style uses this transfer tube instead of that. And this transfer tube has two O-rings on it. And those O-rings can go bad. When these O-rings go bad, it'll bleed the accelerator pump shot into the power valve pocket. There's also a difference in gaskets too. So, and okay, here. This is the standard normal Holley metering block gasket. And here is one of these Ford style carburetors, and you could see, I didn't do this, this is the way I bought it. You could see that this metering block gasket had to be cut out to fit, this transfer tube. So again, she goes right there like that. So if you've got everything else is good, you know, the diaphragm and you got motion and the whole 10 yards, but you're not getting anything out of the squirters or a very small shot, and you've got a Ford type of carburetor, there's a good chance that the O-rings on this transfer tube are bad. And like I said, you got to be aware when you change the meter room blocks, gaskets. If you order just a meter room block gasket, like these universal blue ones, they're not going to come for those carburetors, so you have to trim it out yourself. All right, now, to add insult to injury to complication, there's also a little tiny check ball that goes into these carburetors, and it fits into the body right there, and then it's plugged in place with this tube. Now, it's the one that hit the floor, and I'm not going to go find it. So just imagine a tiny little check ball. Right? That's going to be in there. That's not going to be found on your standard Holley carburetor. All right, moving on. We're going to get into the body of the carburetor itself, and we get back into universal things. So here's where the accelerator pump goes. Here's a secondary accelerator pump in place, okay, with the screw and the shooter and everything. And here's where it would be on the primary side of this carburetor. And these are all of the pieces that comprise that, okay? So at the bottom of the bore, at the bottom of that hole, you're going to find this needle valve, okay? And this needle valve is like an anti-siphon valve, or an valve, you want to call it. Some carburetors use check balls. This one over here uses this well, it's like a needle and seat assembly, right? There's no separate seat. The seat is in the carburetor. Okay, this is where I found the problem on the carburetor that's on the Belvedere, because this was free. Now, I have seen these things jammed and corroded in place. This one was free on that carburetor, which kind of threw me for a loop a little bit. But at the very bottom, which you're not going to be able to see in this, at the very bottom of this is the hole that this blocks off, and that was clogged. So what's the fix for that? Well, the fix for just about any part of the accelerator pump that becomes clogged is I use this stainless wire right here. So people use bread wrappers, you know, for the bag, the bread wrapper, they'll pull the paper off of that and use that to poke through. That works just fine. Some people use like guitar strings, which I've never used a guitar string. I don't really see how a guitar string is going to have the same stiffness as this, but I'm not a musician. I'm a friggin' mechanic. So I use this thin gauge safety wire, and this is literally a lifetime supply if all you do is carburetors, but it's good to have on hand. So with this, all I did was take my stainless wire and run it through there until it unblocked the block. It's an L-shaped passage, so you're not going to be able to get this to pass all the way through, so you go from both sides. And that was the fix on that carburetor. It's unusual, but it happens. But there's lots of things that can go wrong right there at the squirter. So if this little needle here is stuck, obviously it's going to block off flow, but if it's cocked or it's sitting above, like it doesn't get a chance to seal, the engine will pull fuel through the squirters, right? It'll siphon the fuel up through the squirters, and that's what this is intended to stop. So if you give it gas and you see that, you know, let's say you open the throttle, the RPM really comes up, and then you see a mist coming from the squirters right there, okay, it means that there's a failure of this thing to seat. All right, now moving up, we've got the actual squirter assembly. So the squirter assembly consists of this screw, and this is a special screw with that bevel on it, and this beveled washer. Oh God, you try to find one of these, like when you're trying to slam one of these carburetors together all right. So this beveled washer fits on there like so. You knew that was coming, right? You knew that was coming. Hang on, I got a screwdriver. Now I'll just take this apart. Okay, so that's the assembly, and that beveled washer fits between the screw and the shooter body. If that's missing, it'll squirt gas in between. You'll get a siphon effect, but it'll also squirt gas up between the screw and the body without that little gasket. All right, now on the bottom, you have this little washer right here. And this is another important one because, again, see, the squirter holes are very small. So when there's pressure, trying to push fuel through, it'll actually leak between the body and the carburetor body if you don't have this gasket right there. So you give it an accelerator pump and you see it squirting gas from underneath and you're not getting a good squirt from the shooters, that's your problem. Now the shooters are the last place where you're going to find an accelerator pump problem. So many places to find an accelerator pump problem, right? And there are different styles of shooters. This one is probably the most common of them all, okay? And those little shooters will become clogged. So you'll see either one or both of them, like you give it gas, you open the throttle and you only see fuel squirting from one side of this, well then you know that the other side is clogged. If everything else works, and let's say you loosen this screw, open the throttle, and the gas gushes between the body and the booster, the carburetor body and the booster body, well then you know that the shooters themselves are clogged. And again, all you do is you use your stainless wire, your bread wrapper, or whatever you're going to use, and just poke it through. Okay, you can never do this stuff. Here we go. And you poke it through just like that, both sides. And that will clear that. It's only taken me 22 minutes to go through the accelerator pump system. I think I covered all of this. Like I tried to lay it out in a way that I could go step by step and show you, each part of it. There may be variations of this that I'm missing, but if you follow along from the very beginning to the end of this, regardless of what variations you may have on your carburetor, you're going to find the answer. Now it just takes time. Very complicated, very convoluted system. I don't know why Holley stuck with this thing. I can understand back in the 1950s they configured it this way. You would think over the years it would become simplified, but no, it's still a lot of monkey motion and a lot of passages and a lot of little tiny things that can get clogged and cause you a lot of frustration if you don't know where to look. All right, guys, so that's it. Holley carburetor accelerator pump troubleshooting and repair. I hope you got something out of that. I'll see you tomorrow. Yeah, I covered everything.